Namo Buddhaya. Namo So, Dhamma friends, we finished 4 full days of meditation already. So I want to again take a few questions from the box because they've been building up and there wouldn't be enough time to answer them in one night. There's all kind of seems that there's even one on a paper napkin. And kind of hard up here, I guess, for paper or something.
What's about?
We'll take this one first. I can blow my nose. Is the 5th aggregate or skandha, the I consciousness, equal the aham, the ego or I consciousness, or consciousness even when no I is appearing in it? So we haven't got that far yet, but of course I mentioned the 5 aggregates, and we've been going through them. But we've only really covered in detail the first one so far. Last night we talked about the first one. Tonight, actually, I want to talk about at least the second one. But so the 5th one is consciousness, and we take the consciousness to be self or I. These are called aggregates of clinging. So we cling to it. We cling to the consciousness as my consciousness, or I am conscious. And everything that we experience in the world is related back to I. This is happening to I, or me, or mine. I'll talk more about that later briefly. But this comes to the distinction of between consciousness and awareness. Because all human beings have the I consciousness, then that consciousness is basically, we cling to it because it's, we identify with it as mine. But the awareness, when one reaches a state of meditation where the ego has basically been let go of, and the awareness kind of expands, as it were, and where the ego's functions are no longer active. And there's just sort of awareness, a larger space of awareness without the thought of I, me, or mine and trying to manipulate and change and react to things. Then I usually like to call that awareness. So I just, at least in my explanations, I I distinguish that, when you say consciousness, that refers generally to the I consciousness, the ego consciousness. Whereas awareness is the consciousness more or less without the I and the self. But it's still consciousness. But it's, sometimes you might call it pure consciousness, because it's purified of the ego and of all the neurotic reactions and so on, and clinging and aversion. But and so that Vijnana Khanda, the fifth aggregate, is, it's the dualistic consciousness, whereas the awareness is more, already without the ego. So it's no longer an act. There's no clinging to it, because the objects and the reactions to the objects have disappeared. But anyway, I'll talk more about that perhaps later when we go over consciousness more. What is third eye consciousness? The third eye. How many of you have been reading Lobsang Rampa? Don't believe what he says about the third eye. He talks about drilling a hole in the skull. But generally, in yoga, even the third eye normally referred to the sixth chakra, which is called Agnya Chakra, or the sixth chakra, but or the eye of wisdom. But it's not really an eye; it's just a euphemism. It's just a terminology. When we say the eye of wisdom, it's the wisdom eye, but it's not any eye, any physical eye, but it's a inherent and potential, the power of wisdom that's within the mind, that can see things beyond our ordinary senses. So that, say, like extrasensory perception or other types of psychic power, or just the ability to perceive subtler realities. So we might say that, especially in terms of the Dhamma and developing wisdom into anicca, dukkha, and anatta. So that would be like the opening of the third eye, when you start to experience sort of transcendental states that are not normally observable through our fleshy eyes or even our normal sensory apparatus. So it's what the mind can see that these fleshy eyes cannot see. So it's just a term that's become popularized, the third eye, but it's just a term. And tearing up our maps. Okay. So it's during watching the breath, or during concentrating on the breathing. If you do loving kindness, will it not take your focus away from the breath? Won't it affect concentration? How can you combine the two? I guess you're referring to in the morning when we started meditation. I suggested, combine the thought of breathing in, may I be well and happy, breathing out, may all beings be well and happy. Well, you're not doing that for the whole meditation. You're just doing that for the preliminary, while taking some deep, slow breaths just to help to relax and center yourself. You're doing that, but you don't go on doing that, at least not the way that I suggested, doing it all the time while you're breathing in and out. So that was simply a preliminary thing. Then you let go of that after you've done it a number of times, and feel relaxed and so on. Then you let go of that, those may I be well and happy, those words, and you just get, focus back on the breathing in the way of concentration. So, but yeah, saying the words and trying to focus and seeing the subtle sensation would be a distracting from trying to develop a more, focused concentration and quieting the mind. Because even those are still thoughts, even though they are considered beautiful thoughts and right thoughts, they're still thoughts. So, those are only used in the beginning, and then in order to get the desired effect, and then they're let go of, as well as with other types of reflective thinking and so on. They're only used as in the beginning, and then they're let go of to go into the deeper non-verbal type of awareness and concentration. Oh. Can you please explain the significance of hanging a human body at the entrance of the meditation hall? The bones, skulls, put away on the grounds in different places near the peace pole, are they real? Whose? Why? Well, the skeleton is hanging out there, that's plastic, by the way. It's used as a reminder that underneath all of, this individual identity and all this, this body is, equal. Everyone's equal. They're just a rack of bones, and that's the common identity of all beings, is that we're just a skeleton. And it's to remind us of the impermanence and death. The fact that, this body, if it died and you keep it outside for one day with vultures, it'll look like that skeleton very quick. They'll pick every bit of flesh off of it in 12 hours. And so we could go from being, a talkative, active person to just a bare skeleton of bones in a very quick period of time. So anyway, it's used as a reminder about impermanence and death. And when you go by, it's like looking in a mirror. And actually, a skeleton, you can use that as a good meditation. In Sri Lanka, when I was practicing I like to say, a gung-ho monk, I had a skull. I kept a human skull right by in my cave on a stone in my pillow, and I go to sleep looking at it that far away. And also, I spent many nights under the full moon doing walking meditation, just walking the skeleton, what I call walking the skeleton. So just like you walk your dog, you can walk your skeleton. And that means, just doing walking meditation, but just kind of visualizing just a skeleton walking. And you can get very blissed out, actually. Get very blissed out. Just to, even stopped and laughed out loud sometimes because it was so humorous. I'm just seeing this skeleton walking along. So it can give very good insights. And you can get a good insight into emptiness also. So the other, skeletons, if you've been down to our wall, the Wailing Wall, columbarium down there, there's a skeleton, a deer skeleton. And these are just skeletons we found in the forest for deer skulls, dog skulls. And the people have just brought, dog drags them in or something. And so we put them here and there. Because you can't see them all the time in Philadelphia or Washington, right? Downtown. So gives people something to look at and to remind that that's our fate. Actually, I didn't mention it. I started to mention it yesterday when we were talking about the body contemplation and about seeing the body as 32 parts, and then there's the 4 elements, and then the last part is the cemetery contemplations, where you actually visualize yourself having been killed and your body going through all the stages, 9 stages of decomposition. And the very last one, or the last 3 or so, is a skeleton, then bones scattered here and there, and then just bone powder. And each time you say, this body also will be like that. It hasn't gone beyond that. And so it's used as a kind of meditation. It helps to dampen our vanity and our also our clinging and attachment, knowing that death could come at any time. But those are not things that especially Western people like to contemplate very much. They put all signs of old age, away. Put all the people in old folks' homes so you can't see them. Here's a question about the sanskara, letting the energy run its course by leaving it alone, such as an itch. Because we were talking last night about sensations and about, somebody had asked that question about whether all the painful sensations are they past karma, and how are they, by watching them, do they go away? This idea of energy running its course, the body has many natural conditions. An itch is an itch. There's a cause for it. And, it's not that it runs its course, it can come back also. You have an itch, you can scratch it, it can subside for, a couple minutes, and you can come back again. And even though you get rid of one itch, like if you get poison ivy and you treat it, it can go away, but if you can get it again and again. So a lot of the sensations that happen in the body are just reoccurring things that keep recurring. It's not the energy running its course; it's running your mind out. Your mind stopped paying attention to it. The energy is in your mind, not in the sensation so much. Because whatever attention you give to the sensation, that is making it real, not the sensation itself. It's the attention that your mind is giving the sensation, the preoccupation that you're paying to that sensation, the worrying about that sensation, the wanting to get rid of that sensation. That's the energy. And that's the energy we want to run out, not the sensation. Because you're not going to run out the sensation. As long as you have a body, the sensations will be there. And they'll keep reoccurring. It's our mind. We have to start running our mind. Stop running the mind. Don't be too concerned about, sensations. Watch your mind that's reacting to the sensations. And bring that to a stop. And then the sensations will come to a stop. Does prayer work for the person you are praying for? Please explain prayer. I'm not an expert in prayer, but we have some things in our Buddhist practice which may look like prayers. May all beings be well and happy. May all beings be peaceful. That's sort of like a prayer, you might say. May I be free from suffering. But we're not praying to any external kind of deity, hoping for some answer. That's the difference between, some other types of prayer. And these are just aspirations, basically. And just saying, may my parents be well and happy, or my friends be well and happy, may I be well and happy, is not necessarily going to make you well and happy, or make them well and happy, unless you do the practice. You have to do the work. You have to know what causes happiness and what causes suffering. And if you just repeat the words, but you go on living your life unskillfully, then you're going to keep causing yourself suffering over and over again. And wishing other people to be well and happy, or thinking about others, that's more or less for you. They may not be able to feel any of that, feel your thoughts, although they might be able to, because our thoughts are like kind of radio waves, and people can pick up on them. So there could be some of that. Other people can sometimes feel perhaps our thoughts unconsciously. But it's mainly for you, yourself. Metta meditation is for you, yourself. It's to weaken your own prejudice, arrogance, attachment, ill will, resentment, and all these negative types of things toward different classes and types of people. It's to see that, to see the karmic interconnectedness of all things. So, there's cultivating those right thoughts and the practice of metta and other types of aspirations. May I have the strength and energy to meet and overcome all difficulties of life. You're addressing your own unconscious mind. You're not begging this from some place outside. These are all generating your own inner, generating the awakening the latent spiritual faculties that we have inside of ourselves. But sometimes you need to repeat these things over and over and over again, so that those latent faculties can gradually be awakened. So many questions, endless here. Oh, some of these are from yesterday's already. Oh, yeah. I guess that's the end of them. Okay, now I want to kind of carry off where we left off last night in our discussion of the aggregates and the inner, the journey of insight, the inner journey back to the journey through the five aggregates, back to the source, you might say, or the unconditioned. From form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. So the subtlest aspect of our existence, of our being, the mind, is consciousness itself. It's sort of the inner, the most subtlest, the inner dimension to actually to reach, to actually be able to directly perceive it. And where the sense of I is kind of originating from. So we are discussing, we get to the body, and then you get underneath the skin. And so you're getting closer. Now you come from the external world, and you've gotten under the skin to the level of sensation. Now this is where the aggregate of feeling comes in. Feelings are three qualities of the feeling: the pleasant feeling, painful feeling, and neutral feeling. But the feelings are not only coming from the body, but they come from when we see something, there's a feeling generated. A pleasant, painful, neutral feeling. If you see something, that you consider beautiful, or then there's a pleasant feeling arise. If you see something kind of ugly, or maybe a corpse on the road, or maybe you see that skull, and maybe a painful feeling comes because it reminds you of death, or you see it as something negative. Then the same where you hear. Some sounds are pleasing, some other sounds are painful. And the same with smells. Some smells are pleasing, some are painful, unpleasant. And tastes. And then even thoughts. You have certain memories that are painful, that you'd rather not think about. And you have others that are pleasant, that you like to think about. And then others may be neutral. So you have pleasant, painful, and neutral feelings through the six senses. So there's 18 types of feeling in that sense. And it's these feelings are really the first thing that arise in the mind. So it's the first aggregate of the mind. So we mentioned in the 5 aggregates, there's one aggregate of material form, and there's 4 aggregates that belong to the mental process. And basically, what are these feelings? They're basically kind of like vibrations. So if you see a form, what's really happening? There's color vibrations, striking your eye. And then you perceive it. That's why feeling and perception are very closely linked. We'll talk about them together. So feeling is the first aggregate, perception is the second aggregate of the mind. So what we can experience through our senses basically are just sensory vibrations, not objects. You experience sound through the ear, visible vibration through the eye, odors through the nose, flavors through the tongue, pressure and so on through the skin. And then we can cognize memories, emotions, and so on with our mind. But let's stick with the 5 physical senses for now. So these are just vibrations. So you hear something, a vibration runs through your nervous system to the brain. And because of our training since we were a baby and learning language, the brain matches up that vibration and says, that's a dog barking. Or, that's a car going down the road. Or that's so-and-so talking. Baby can recognize the mother's voice. So that is the perception. But what's actually coming through the senses is just a sensory vibration, like electricity or atoms and molecules vibrating and setting off a chain reaction from the sense organ through the nervous system to the brain, where it's matched up, and because of language and learning, the perceptions arise. But so everything that we've ever experienced in life, usually these feelings are associated with like and dislike. That we like the pleasurable feelings and we dislike the painful feelings. But it's the feeling that we really react to. And these are conditioned reactions. We've learned them. Either learn them from our own experience or learn them from society, in the way that we've been programmed to perceive and regard various types of things. So if you're brought up in a family and they say, "Oh, don't go near those kind of people. Those kind of people are bad or evil or this and that." You see, we've gotten programmed with these kind of reactions. And then every time we see or hear those things, we automatically react in those ways. And we become kind of imprisoned by those reactions. And all of our karma is kind of based upon them. So we strive to get a hold of pleasurable feelings we don't yet have. And we try to push away and get away from the painful feelings that come to us. And because there's so many painful experiences in the life, we develop craving for pleasurable experiences in order to get away from our pain. And so we become addicted to pleasurable feelings. We go out of our way to seek them, pleasurable sensations. Have pleasant food to eat and smell and hear and see. We're always stimulating our senses, hoping to get a pleasurable feeling. But these feelings are very short-lived. They may arise from the contact, but very quickly they disappear. And then we have to have something else, because we become kind of addicted to this craving for pleasurable feeling. And it's because we have the fear of the unpleasant feeling. Because we've been experiencing all kind of unpleasant sensations in our life, we have this anxiety and fear that they're going to come to us. So we spend a lot of time scheming and planning how we're going to prevent these unpleasant sensations coming to us. But when they do come to us, we struggle to get away from them. And so that's getting what you don't want. And then not getting what you want, not being able to get all the pleasurable sensations that you would like to have. Because the world doesn't really care about us very much. And the world just goes on in its own way. And we struggle a whole life struggling to find and capture and catch some pleasurable sensations, and the fear and the anxiety of all the painful sensations that are going to come to us. So this is really the predicament of the average person, who doesn't know any recourse. They don't know the escape. And the Buddha said this very nicely in the suttas. When one doesn't understand the satisfaction, the pain as pain, and the escape as it really is toward these feelings, then one has not understood, or realized unsurpassable freedom. So it's disentangling. This is the tangle that we've created. The The outer tangle being the objects and the inner tangle being the attachment and aversion to pleasurable and painful feelings. And of course, the perceptions that are tied up with them. So I like to tell the story from my own childhood about this. I have a very interesting experience where I suffered because I clinged and attached to these objects thinking that they were evil or painful or we don't like. Because people have things what they like and what they don't like. And they think they're absolutely real. They think these things are bad. But they're only bad for you. They're not bad for everybody. And so we believe in the thing, the kind of the games that the mind has created. So how many people have heard my avocado story before? You probably get bored with it, I don't know. So, should I tell it again? Okay, so when I was a young boy, lived in California, we lived near an avocado orchard. And my mother used to serve avocados about twice a week in the season because she knew that avocados were a healthy fruit. And we could also get them almost free by just going into the orchard and picking them up. But I hated them. For some reason, I really didn't like avocados. And so just my mother saying, "Oh, tonight we're having avocados, for dinner," kind of a shudder would go up my spine. So just hearing the word, I suffered. And then when she actually brought the avocados on a plate to the dinner table, and I saw them, another chill went up my spine. So I was suffering through the eye. And then when I brought them up to my nose and smelled them, I almost gagged. And so I suffered through the nose. And then when I actually put it in my mouth to eat it, sometimes I actually vomited or just gagged some more. And then even thinking about them was, I didn't even like to think about them. So in 5 out of 6 ways I suffered because I really believed that avocados were evil. The only one I didn't suffer from was rubbing it on my skin. For some reason, it didn't cause any reaction. But. So I had to look at these avocados, and my mother wouldn't let me watch, Ozzie and Harriet and all the other programs back in the 50s and 60s until I finished my dinner. But my brother and mother and father, they were woofing them down, They liked them. And so if avocados were evil, then you'd think everyone should react in the same way, right? If some object was absolutely this or that value, then everyone should react in the same way. But we know they don't. So fortunately, I was saved by the cat. We had a cat that liked avocados. And so when I heard that we were having the avocados for dinner, I used to let the cat in the house. So he would sit under the kitchen table. Some of you probably have done this yourself, I suppose. And so when my parents went away to watch TV in the den, that was in those days when households only had one TV, one black and white TV in the den, right? And so not these days where there's a TV in every room and above the kitchen table and everything else. But so then I would feed the avocados to the cat, and he would eat them. Then I would take my plate and, "Hey, Mom, look, I've finished." So I'd get my dessert, and then I could go watch TV. So then I told a lie. So you see, because I was clinging to this idea, it led me to unskillful action, telling lies. But that's what happens when we cling tightly to our ideas and opinions. They cause us to do the karma. But anyway, I'm saying this because later I used this as a test when I went to India. And I was, planning on becoming a monk. And I went to the yoga ashram, and the yoga teacher was extolling the virtues of avocados. And in India, they were quite cheap. So I thought, okay, I'll test this Dhamma. Because I had attended a meditation course and I heard all these things about the mind, and it's all in the mind. So I got the avocados and I sat down and first mixed it with some food, to hold my nose. And, first couple of times I still had a gag reaction, but I kept on saying, it's all in the mind, it's all in the mind. Everything is empty. And little by little, I could stop gagging. And then I could take my finger off the nose and still mix it with some food and eat. But little by little I could then start eating them plain. And then I started liking them. And now I love avocados. That's why you see avocados on the... Cook knows I like avocados, so they serve them a lot. But now I'm not really attached to them. But that was proof that was a proof for the Buddhist teaching. I might have become a monk because of that. That sold me on the Buddhist teaching. Because if I could overcome my aversion for avocados, I could probably do it for other things too. So that's the way that we have to try to train ourselves to see these aversions that we have. So many types of, I don't like that, I don't like this. But it limits us, it limits our experience. And it also causes, suffering and pain to ourselves and to others. When basically they're just largely just in our mind. So this is where the meditation on feelings is very important. Because everything else proceeds from feeling. I mean, when I saw an avocado, of course, is a perception. But it's linked to this feeling. And so every time you see the avocado or any object, you're actually seeing the feeling that it's produced. And this is very interesting to understand. We think we have desire or aversion for objects because, that's what we actually see and experience, is the physical object. But it's really the feeling that we want. We want the feeling associated with that object. And so if we think a certain object produces a pleasant feeling for us, then we go for that. But if that feeling changes, and that particular object stops producing that kind of a feeling, we'll stop liking the object. Especially in terms of, let's say, people, relationships. You might have had a friend or, a lover or whatever at one time. You had a lot of good times, but then for some reason they change. And they started producing painful feelings in you by cheating on you or whatever, doing something else. And so then when you see them again, they no longer produce a pleasant feeling. They produce a painful feeling. So this is very interesting. That it's not really the objects that we want, but it's the feeling that we want. But we think we want the object. But those objects can change their feeling. And so it's it's interesting to observe that and to develop that kind of understanding, because then you can have a more healthy relationship to the various types of objects and things that you normally consider that I don't like this and I like that. Because again, it's tied in with our karma. And as long as you don't like something, that's unfinished business that you might have to come back in order to resolve it. So in meditation, we deliberately use feelings and observe our feelings. That's why it's good to have painful feelings arise and irritations, especially for Vipassana meditation. Now, when you're trying to concentrate and just calm your mind, then of course, sounds and other distractions are a thorn, or seen as the enemy, because they're kind of blocking my concentration. I want to concentrate. I want to gain peace of mind. And so anything that disturbs that, there's this fight. Because it's the ego fighting against the things that are trying to prevent its desired goal. But in mindfulness meditation, in Vipassana meditation, it's the opposite. We want to have irritations and distractions arise because that's our grist for the mill. That's the way we change and transform our nervous system. By allowing these painful or irritating sights, sounds, smells, taste to come in, but to be aware of them with mindfulness and understanding, and to realize that ultimately they are empty of any type of ugliness or badness or pain. But it's only what our mind superimposes on it. Such as, somebody making some sound in the meditation hall. You're getting disturbed by somebody coughing, for example. Or somebody breathing heavily. Or somebody doing something else. So you might feel that irritation because they're disturbing my concentration. I can't concentrate. But instead, if you're just aware of hearing, the proper way to be aware is when you feel something through the senses, just to make the bare attention of, it's hearing. It's just a hearing vibration. Don't turn that sound vibration into an object. Of course, the object is the perception. So you hear a sound, you say, no, that's that person coughing. And then other irritating reactions arise. So in Vipassana practice, that means that's why we meditate on the four elements, and to see everything as just vibrations. So you cut the perception process. But once you start turning the vibration into an object, like even my knee, that's a perception. Okay, you feel something there, there's a painful feeling there, but you say, that's my knee pain. And then you start worrying, am I going to get this or that's going to happen? I'm going to get crippled. Or so many ideas might go through your mind. Because it relates back to I, and the fear and the worry of the I and the ego. But instead, you should just be aware, it's just vibration. And that's why the Buddha had us go through the body contemplation. That you go from the 32 parts to the 4 elements. Because if you just stick with seeing the body as 32 parts, you can still get attached to those parts. But when you break it down into just elemental vibrations, earth vibration, water vibration, and so on, there's nothing you can really, self-identify with. And so this is a psychological process. It's a very clever scheme that the Buddha, came up with to sort of trick the mind out of itself. And it's a very specialized form of insight. And it belongs to the part of the enlightenment factor of investigation of the Dhamma. So this is investigating the Dhamma. What is this thing I'm hearing? It's just sound vibration. But because of the, perception is turning this sound vibration into an object, and then I get attached to it. So you can actually investigate it that way, even while you're meditating and something happens, you can, dissect it into its elemental parts and see how it's foolish to be attached to it. And then the mind lets go of it. But that's an integrative part of Vipassana meditation, called investigation of the Dhamma, and part of right thinking. It's knowing how things arise and how they cease. And everything arises because of causes, and it ceases because of a cause. And so, it's especially pertains to this 5 aggregate process that we've been discussing. Because so you learn to go through feelings. Because when you're meditating and if you're reacting to all these sights, sounds, smells, tastes that are coming through the senses, then your mind won't find any peace. It'll kind of get stuck there. It will get blocked and can't go deeper. So you train yourself to be aware when the various sensations, that's a pleasant feeling. That's an unpleasant feeling. And you understand, that these are just feelings. And you understand how your ideas and perceptions arise. And so you let go of them, and the mind is able to come to a deeper state of tranquility. Then after the perception, the aggregate of perception, comes the aggregate of the reactions or habit formations. I'll talk more about those later. So the next kind of stage of insight meditation are by focusing on the aggregates. After the body is then to you can listen to the mind, and you can actually see when, especially with painful feelings, you can see that kind of tensing up, or that kind of intention that the mind want to pull away from a certain type of sound or a smell or a taste or a body feeling or even a thought. And so you can directly see these conditioned tendencies. And to try to avoid, reacting to them, or at least in a negative way. Like all the itches. So the itches especially are a good training ground. And all these body sensations that you might feel, these, all these different unpleasant sensations. So those are, good that they arise, because that's how we develop insight. And there's a the six senses are like a simile of the monkey trap with our senses. So back in India in the old days, they used to hunt monkeys. So a hunter would get a coconut and cut a slit in the coconut shell. And just the slit would be big enough for a monkey to stick his hand in like this. So he'd stick his hand in there and there'd be some bait inside, food. And the monkey would grab the food. And this coconut shell would be chained to a tree. And the monkey would try to get his hand out. But now he can't get the hand out because he's holding on. And he's holding on tightly. So the hunter comes by in the evening and sees the monkey. Foolish monkey. And then roasts him over the fire for dinner. So that's what happens to us. We suffer because of our painful feelings, because we're holding on tightly, believing they're real. I don't like this, I don't like that. Or the pleasant feelings too, until we get singed by them in one way or another. And then there's another one, more illustrative of the six senses, another monkey trap. So the hunter would get a piece of wood, a piece of bark from a tree, and smear it with pitch, like pine sap, sticky substance. It's like a flypaper. And chain that to a tree. And so the monkey comes bebopping along and sees that there's a piece of food in the middle, and grabs it, and his hand gets stuck to the piece of wood. He's trying to shake it and can't get it off. So he puts his other hand and tries to push it off. And that hand gets stuck. And he's got both hands stuck. So he puts one foot up there and tries to push it off with the foot. And the foot gets stuck. Then he puts up the other foot. And now that foot gets stuck. So both hands and both feet are stuck. Then he tries to butt it off with his head. And his head gets stuck. And then the hunter comes by in the evening and says, foolish monkey, and roasts him for dinner. So in the same way, our mind gets stuck on, the six senses in its struggle to get away from the painful sensations, or clinging on to the pleasant sensations. And sometimes even in the space of a few minutes, you all your senses will get stuck. Maybe like when you're eating, maybe a flavor on your tongue, maybe a smell, and then you see something, you hear something, and after sitting a long time, pain in your body. So sometimes in a very short space of time, even in 10 seconds, you can suffer through all the six senses. But it's because we're not mindful, and we allow our mind to get irritated or annoyed, or think something unpleasant toward one of these type of sensual stimulations. So in our meditation practice, in Vipassana, actually, we open up the senses and just listen to them, and listen to the flow of impermanence coming through. You're feeling some body sensations, and you hear a sound. You hear a thought, a sense of thought. Of course, in meditation, inside, when we're meditating, you don't have too much smell or taste. So they're not too active in, like in sitting meditation. But when you go outside, then there might be more of that, visual and smell and tactile vibration. And the mind is continually reacting to those things. But the idea is to understand the process, to understand how the mind easily gets caught in the web of the senses, and especially the attachment to feelings and perceptions, which then we go on to create karma about. The feeling and the perception are basically caused by the past karma. And every time we satisfy our desire with an object, it reinforces the idea that that object is a source of pleasure for us. And every time we react to an object that's painful, we reinforce the idea that this object is an object of pain for us. And so we'll continue to be kind of trapped within that cycle, what I call the pleasure-pain syndrome. So that's why in our Vipassana practice, the feelings and sensations are actually a very vital part of the training in transforming the mind and gaining insight. It's not just about quieting your mind and just being absorbed in a blissful feeling. That's more or less just a hypnotic state. But it's really this confronting the senses and tuning into the flow of impermanence. I'll talk more about that tomorrow morning. Further notes and instructions. So I think that may be enough for this evening.